House Bill 2303, relating to pseudoephedrine and prescribing an effective date.
Question now arises upon third reading and final passage of House Bill 2303A. Representative Post.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and honorable colleagues. I want to take you back in history a little bit. For those who were here, this will be old history, but for those who weren't here, this will be new history. In 2005, we were in the midst, in Oregon and in the United States, a grip of a meth epidemic. The meth epidemic hasn't gone away, but the meth lab epidemic that was so horrible in those days is gone, thanks to a couple of things. First of all, then Congresswoman Darlene Hooley started a federal law that required you put pseudoephedrine-type products behind the counter. That was federally, so every state in the nation had to put pseudoephedrine products behind the counter with a written or electronic log to track the sales of that product. So Darlene Hooley got that done back in 2005. At about the same time, Oregon, this legislative body, chose to go with the prescription route along with Mississippi, those two states. 35 states after 2005, as we progressed and technology changed, the NPLEX system was created, which was an online tracking system. Because again, pseudoephedrine needed to be tracked, online or written. 35 states joined the NPLEX system where, as you've probably heard, people go to other states and they show their driver's license or government ID and they get their 2 packages of Sudafed and they go home. If you went to try it again, within 30 days you would be denied by the system. So Oregon instituted a prescription system. And what I want to make sure I'm very clear on is that prescription system was fantastic for that time because there wasn't the technology that we have today of systems like the NPLEX system. So fast forward now to where we are today. We have new technology. A couple of things that are going on that's also changed in the methamphetamine world that's pretty sad is the 2018 National Drug Threat Assessment Program, which is from the Department of Justice and the DEA, says that the purity, potency, and price data indicate meth availability is increasing in the USA. And here's some numbers. When people were cooking meth in bathtubs, and it was jeopardizing kids, and it was putting families in extremely horrible situations, the purity of the meth that was being cooked up was about 7%. The purity of the meth that's being sold on the streets in Oregon right now is 90%. It's really good stuff if you like meth. The street prices have declined by $70. The purity went from 6% back when it was being cooked in bathtubs to 93.2%. So it's pure, it's plentiful, and it's cheap. So the idea of somebody taking Sudafed and cooking it into meth is somewhat silly at this point. It's not economically feasible. It's too good and cheap right now to purchase. So that's why we move forward with technology to the system that we have now, which is the NPLEX system, which is what HB 2303 does. There's some things that have come up in the last few days that I've heard about, and we'll probably talk some more about in a little bit. But the thing that I want to make sure you understand is that the last amendment that we did to the bill was, I think, the most important thing we did. It gives Oregonians a choice. If you, I'm going to use Bob and Sally because I like Bob and Sally. If Bob decides to go to his doctor and get a prescription for Sudafed and go to the pharmacy and buy Sudafed, Bob can do that under this bill. Nothing changes. But if Sally decides she wants to go to Rite Aid, Walgreens, you pick your one you want, and buy Sudafed herself, she shows her government ID of any type, the picture ID, and she gets a subscribed amount. It's usually 2 packages. In the bill, it says the exact grams for 30 days. And I know I have talked to people in this body and across the way that have gone to other states and done this. So that's what I am proposing with this bill. Do it the old way, do it the new way. It's all about choice and affordability and accessibility. Lastly, I put a 3-year sunset on this. And I felt that that was really important as a concession for this, is that if we do this and meth labs come out of the woodwork again, in 3 years, this goes away. If meth labs do not increase, then we take the sunset off and everybody goes on their happy way. The last thing I want to say about this is I was fortunate in 2016 when there was a governor's race, I was allowed to have a question on one of the governor's polls. And the question was actually done incorrectly. I wish they hadn't done it this way, but it actually was interesting. The question was asked, and this was all party lines, all demographics, all parts of Oregon, from rural to metro Oregon. The question was asked, would you be in favor of repealing current law allowing Oregonians with proper ID to purchase pseudoephedrine over the counter? Remember, this is not over the counter, though. This is behind the counter, but that's what the poll question asked. 57% across the board said yes, they are in favor of that. So it's a home run for our voters, our friends, our neighborhoods, our constituents. They love this. And by the way, those 65 and older, those younger than 65 were the strongest advocates of this, under 65. So I just want to say, I think it would benefit Oregon greatly. It would bring us into the 21st century. And again, I thank the people who were here and over there in the Senate who passed the prescription bill back in 2005. It was the right thing to do. But we have new technology and new ways to go about this. So now I'd like to turn it over to my co-carrier, Representative Hayden.
Thank you, Representative Co-Chair. Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question to the carrier.
Question of the carrier. Does the carrier yield?
Yes.
He does.
Thank you, Representative Post, for taking my questions. I think I've given them all to you in advance. I apologize if I haven't. My first question is, what are the privacy waivers required when using the NPLEX system?
Thank you for the question, and Madam Speaker, this bill only seeks to change the law to allow people the choice of purchasing these products behind the counter without a prescription, or continue the way they're purchasing products now and write a prescription. If they choose no prescription, they would use the NPLEX system to ensure meth labs do not return. If they choose prescription, on page 3, line 14 to 16 of the bill, it clearly states it would remain as it is today, no information entered into the NPLEX system. The bill is about giving the consumers choice. There are no privacy waivers. In some states, notice is provided at the point of sale to consumers that information is entered into a database.
Thank you. What are the HIPAA requirements for the information stored in the NPLEX database?
Representative, one moment, please. I assume there's multiple questions.
Oh, yes.
So I'm going to allow you just go through your list because I think you have a couple. So is that all right with you, Representative?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
What are the HIPAA requirements with the data stored in the system? PSE is an over-the-counter, behind-the-counter consumer product that's been approved for 40 years, so it doesn't necessarily fall within any HIPAA requirement. Over-the-counter medicines don't generally fall under HIPAA. It's important to note, however, that even under existing Oregon law, law enforcement is allowed to view PDMP data on PSE products upon purchase, upon request. It's treated unlike any other controlled substance in the PDMP.
To my next question, does NPLEX sell any data, consumer data, sales data, or is there a legal restriction on their ability to sell data, or is it a company policy around their sale of consumer data?
As far as I know right now, the answer is no to that.
Do you know, follow-up, do you know if that's a legal restriction or a company policy?
I do not know.
Thank you. Does the provision in this bill referring to a subpoena actually limit law enforcement access to data in light of any federal preemption or the use of the words may obtain rather than the outright prohibition on a subpoena?
The state subpoena requirement would apply to all state and local law enforcement, and our intention was that a subpoena be required as a concession. Our intention is for a subpoena to be required for law enforcement and for the board to determine rules to implement that process for requesting records.
So a subpoena would be required under the language of the bill, even though another section of the bill allows unfettered law enforcement access to that data?
I can only say the PDMP doesn't require a warrant for PSE EPH products based on 475.973B. However, a subpoena still requires a court system to approve the request for the data and maintains the accountability to law enforcement.
So because this database is merged with the database from other states, how do we ensure that the data will not be released through other states with more laxed policies around privacy than Oregon has?
The company that runs NPLEX also does do the PDMP, and they can configure the database to block all Oregon transactions from other states and force records to be requested via the same subpoena process.
Is there any remedy for any individual whose data was accessed or released in violation of any existing privacy protections?
There's nothing in the bill that we're aware of.
Can patients find out who have access to their data or who their data has been transferred or sold to?
One, data would never be transferred or sold, and two, the system has the ability to let any appropriate official know who has accessed any specific person's data, and therefore the board or any other appropriate authority has the ability to do so.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, to the bill.
Thank you, Representatives. To the bill.
Thank you, colleagues. As you can probably hear from my line of questioning, I have some concerns about the ability to access medical data through this NPLEX system. There's several differences. Well, first, I should say I'm happy that the legislation that was passed several years ago has reduced the number of methamphetamine labs in the state of Oregon. I think it was very successful, as our colleague said. What I am not concerned about the increase in meth labs by putting our Sudafed products on behind the counter, but with the NPLEX system. What I'm most concerned about is our data privacy breaches, and law enforcement's unfettered access to our medical data. First, we have a PDMP that was mentioned, and what we should note is that our PDMP, our prescription drug monitoring program, is the most secure in the country. No other state has the requirement that a court order, a warrant, is required in order to get patient information out of our PDMP. This was a very well-negotiated, very tightly negotiated result of long hours put in a work group. So what I'm concerned about is that we now have a system that we're setting up that doesn't have the same restrictions as the PDMP, but does track our the fact that we are purchasing medications without the same kind of privacy protections, both with a private company having our medical data, and as you heard, no remedy if that medical data is wrongfully released or the system is breached, and that according at least to Legislative Counsel, the NPLEX system does not specify any requirements to obtain a subpoena or warrant stored in the database. Instead, it appears that law enforcement has unlimited access to view NPLEX information. According to the NPLEX website, the database is available at no cost to law enforcement and, quote, helps law enforcement search our secure site to locate known suspects. So, colleagues, I believe that there's a security issue with the way the data is stored and who has access to it, and I'm frankly not comfortable with access being denied because of a business policy and not because of privacy laws. I'm also concerned that, yes, this bill gives consumers a choice as to whether or not to get a prescription or to buy behind the counter, but I don't think that our laws and our policy should penalize people who want to protect their own privacy and incentivize giving up privacy. I just believe that that's problematic and that individual consumers have to make that choice. In addition, I asked about the ability of, or this information falling under HIPAA, and the response was that law enforcement is allowed to view the PDMP and that there's no HIPAA requirements. And like I said earlier, colleagues, that's just not true. We have search warrant requirements for the PDMP. Law enforcement can only access with a search warrant, and that is just not true for the NPLEX system. The bill itself gives unfettered access. So finally, colleagues, I think the only other thing I would add is that I'm very concerned about federal preemption of our privacy laws, as they are more strict than those in other states. And there's nothing actually that would, in this bill or in the law, that would stop our privacy laws from being preempted by the federal government, especially when those databases are connected to other states with a less onerous system. And so for that, colleagues, I urge a no vote.
Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Post, would you like to close?
I would. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to mention, first of all, I am not an attorney. I've watched a lot of Law and Order, but that's all. And the representative from Portland's West Side, she's an attorney, so I'm not going to argue with her. She brought up some great points, and I appreciate that. What I did when I put the floor letter that you might have on your desk that sort of explains the choice is that I was really concerned about the affordability and access. If we leave things as they are, understand that Sudafed or pseudoephedrine products, NyQuil, Claritin, I forget which number, D or C, those have pseudoephedrine in them. So if we go across the border and buy it, it's a controlled substance. It's illegal to pass it around to your friends and family. It's a controlled substance. I want to get away from that. So I made this little diagram here, and it includes stick figures because I knew that even the rep from Southern Klamath and Lake County would understand stick figures. So you got it. I hope you'll look at that because that's what it talks about. Go to your doctor, get a prescription, go to the PDMP, get your Sudafed. Or just go to the pharmacy and get your Sudafed. Affordable, accessible, decriminalizing, and protects privacy. And I would appreciate your aye vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system.